We have a pretty big problem with Wight King Narses, and I'm pretty confident that this is a coding error. This is a coding bug. Now, I was contacted by Scratch. He also had a message from Shinny. Now, Shinny is a very, very good higher-end arena player, got his Wight King Narses, and he was saying to Scratch, why is my Wight King Narses getting polymorphed? That was his question. Now, when you look at Wight King Narses here, he doesn't really have any debuffs. He's got the chance to put skills on cooldown. That doesn't get you polymorphed. He doesn't do any debuffs or any sort of effects on his A3. He doesn't do anything other than a block revive on the A3 here as well. There's nothing on his passive. So he doesn't do any debuffs. He doesn't remove buffs, but he does place a block revive. And what we were discovering through the testing with Shinny, and then sort of me speaking to Scratch as well, and I've spoken to Shinny about this as well, that when he places this block revive, he's getting polymorphed. And we were like, well, that doesn't make sense because, you know, Shinny is a very popular, he really, really likes using an E3 Blood Twin. I'm not a big an E3 Blood Twin fan. I don't actually have him. What faction is he in? He's in High Elves. What faction is an E3? An Undead Horde, surely. So he's a Demon Spawn, not an Undead Horde. He likes to use an E3 because an E3, like Constantine, I use Constantine instead of an E3, and I also use Phenax. Enemies killed by this champion cannot be revived. So whenever an E3 does damage, he block revives. Now, this is exactly the same thing. Notice a slight text difference. It is saying enemies killed by this champion cannot be revived. It's not saying it places a debuff. Now, contrary to popular belief, the block revive is actually a debuff that gets placed on your enemy when you do it. So as the hero kind of dies, it places a debuff and then the hero just dies and then it block revives. When we talk about Wight King Narses here, he's actually saying he will place a block revive debuff, which is a bit unusual. When we have a look at someone like Phenax, Phenax is a very popular block revive. Enemies killed by this skill cannot be revived. Okay, what about Constantine? Let's run through the order here. Enemies killed by this enemy cannot be revived. We also have Queen Eva here. Enemies from this skill cannot be revived. It is the same concept across the board. All of these block revive champions that we have in the game. I think Foley's also another one. I think he's in the Dark Elf here. Again, enemies by this skill can't be revived, but you can see it's still showing you the debuff, right? It's still showing you the block revive debuffs. When we look in the description here, it is saying this debuff blocks revive. So it is this same concept, but the way they've coded it and the way they've worded it is causing a huge problem for Wight King Narses because he is not doing it the same way that every other champion that block revives. He's placing a block debuff at the wrong point in battle. So we're going to get a bit technical here. This is a technical explanation, and hopefully I can pass this video along to Plarium and they can adjust it, because I think, you know, if every other block revive champion works one way and he works differently, he should work similarly to every other block revive, because the problem you're going to have here is he might kill someone, but then he polymorphs himself. That's just hugely problematic and goes against his whole philosophy of he doesn't really debuff, and we don't really have block revive as a debuff style effect. So it's really problematic in my opinion. So let me get to the technical, the sort of how this is, why this is broken, what is it doing? So the way the battle engine processes all of your effects is done through phases, okay? It's a technical term. It basically means it has a series of different things that happen at like very specific points in the battle. So you have things like after I've dealt damage, before I calculate that damage, before I process an effect on an enemy, at the start of a round, at the end of a round, at the end of a hero's turn, at the start of the hero's turn. We have all of these different phases to allow for all of the different complex skills that we have. So for example, we might look at someone like the new Barbarian, Alaz. He's got this passive that's going to increase his defense. So the way that that actually is coded is at the start of the round, it sets a hero counter, like a sort of just a calculating value at 0. Every time he counterattacks, it adds 1 to that counter. And at the start of this champion's next turn, which in coded sense means the next time the turn meter is filled, it adds to the defense that you had when you entered battle. So that's how it is calculating it. If you didn't have that phase of at the start of my next tick, then how would you ever actually add that stat bonus? You know, and then we have things like Rotus passive. Here we all know how powerful it is. He will not take more than 50% damage. Now you need a phase to know that you're going to take more than 50% damage before the damage is dealt. Because if you actually apply this effect at the point in which the damage has already been dealt, he can't actually do anything because he's probably already dead. Because the damage gets dealt, then he goes, oh, would I have died from that damage? It's too late. So there's a phase that gets introduced where this is calculated as a prediction before the damage is done. So it works out how much damage he would take before that damage is applied. It then halves it which is why it doesn't work so well with Ward of the Fallen, or why it works so well with Ward of the Fallen. Ward of the Fallen is calculating it before the damage is dealt, so it reduces it down, where this is calculating it before the damage is calculated. It's doing it in a different phase. So all of these phases are a very technical thing that you don't ever experience in the game. You play in the game, it just attacks and works. But when it comes to this particular issue, the phase matters. Every block revive champion in the game, you know, we've got a Blood Gorge, again, enemy skill with this. It is processing it on a phase at the hero's death. It's coded as phase 71. If a developer player is working on this, they'll understand what I'm saying. That is the phase that is working. Now, Polymorph is calculated on a different phase. So Polymorph here has a chance of placing a sheep on an enemy when they place debuffs on this champion, or when an enemy removes and steals them. That's how we know it works. If I place a debuff, I have a chance to become a sheep. This processes after an effect has been processed on the enemy holding sheep. So if I attack, say, a Siphi has Polymorph, Siphi will process the chance of placing sheep after an enemy has processed a debuff effect on her. Now, typically, most debuffs are processed either after an effect has been processed or after damage has been dealt, right? 53 is the typical thing for most things. After I deal damage, I process my debuff effects. And this is the issue with Wight King Narses. Instead of it being coded as 71, which is when the hero is dead that I've targeted, when I attack someone, if they die, I then do it. Instead of doing that, it's doing it after I've dealt damage. And that must mean that the battle engine is processing the damage dealt before an effect is completed, because the after effect completion is when Polymorph is triggering. So essentially what happens is Wight King Narses attacks, say that enemy loses all of his health, it then processes the block revive after he deals damage. After that point, the effect comes to a conclusion. It's completed its thing where it needs to do with this ability. Polymorph will then roll and go, you placed a debuff, I'm going to trigger Polymorph and sheep him. And it must mean that hero death is processed after the effect is processed. So in a chain reaction, it's kind of going damage dealt, process ended, process after process affected, then hero's death. So to fix this problem, this needs to be coded exactly like every other block revive in the game. At the point of a hero dying, that's when this should be processed, because this is making it so that he is a sheep magnet on his A3. And you can't control this because block revive is not an accuracy check. Can't resist a block revive debuff. As far as I know, it's irresistible. That's always been the case, because when you apply block revive, it gets applied in that irresistible kind of concept. It just goes on. You can't get rid of it. It's not meant to be a debuff in that sense. It's meant to be something that just happens, but it happens to be coded as a debuff. So it's a pretty big issue. Hopefully Playroom take a look at this. I will give a bit of a heads up to the moderators in the official Discord. And I've also mentioned to Scratch. I might be jumping on a video with him talking about it in more detail. This is the really technical explanation of it though. But in a summary, the best way to explain this, it's processing the block revive before Polymorph gets processed, where every other block revive champion in the game processes block revive after Polymorph gets processed, and it is causing problems already because the top end arena meta now, it is all Polymorph. I thought it wouldn't be, but I guess if everyone wants to go sheep, then there is this concept in sales called the sheep factor. If your neighbors are doing it, your next door neighbor's doing it, the person on the street is doing it, you might as well do it as well because you think it must be the way to do it. And that's what's happening with Polymorph. Because of the stat changes, everyone is going Polymorph, which means Wight King Narses is going to become a sheep. It's almost always going to happen if you use this ability. That, or you basically can never use this ability and you're just reliant on A3 and A1, A2 and A1. It's a bit of a problem. So in my opinion, it should be similar to every other block revive champion in the game. It's not like it's beyond conditions here. For example, Constantine on his passive, if he's not with Vlad, he only kills from certain factions. So it's not like you can say, oh, well, all the other block revives, they don't have conditions. He has a condition. So it's not like the need for 3 buffs is a problem here. Make the block revive consistent with every other block revives so that actually our Void Legendary doesn't get punished for some very erroneous coding error. There you go, guys. It's a pretty big bug. Let me know in the comments below, have you been experiencing this problem? I think it could be quite problematic at the high-end arena where Wight King Narses will see a lot of playtime. Hopefully they can get on top of it. I have been watching and seeing a lot of feedback about Polymorph. I probably will do a video on it talking about what I think about Polymorph, and if I was a developer, how would I actually go about fixing this problem? Because I don't think you can just delete the issue. I don't think you just delete Polymorph. It does have a counter, but the problem is it's just too powerful, and there's lots of different things you can do to fix it. But I think simple fixes can also make it a lot better as well. But I wanted to bring this attention straight away because I know a lot of you are going to be getting Wight King Narses, and they should bug fix this at the earliest opportunity. There is a patch going out in probably 2 weeks. They always do a patch at the start of the month. This should be able to make it into that patch because it's a very simple change. You just need to change the phasing of this skill. It's a digit change in the code. It is not a complicated change to do. Let's hope that they actually fix it. But apart from that, guys, I'll catch you in the next video.